Hey everyone, it's Dan, and as part of my Python Q&A call that I put out on Twitter asking for questions that you'd like me to cover, I got the following very interesting question. So Ron Thomas here, he asked, how is Python going to evolve in the next 5 to 10 years? And when I saw this question, I stopped for a moment and I gave it some thought. And I came to the conclusion that it is very hard to predict what's going to happen over the next 5 to 10 years in tech. Not just Python, but tech in general. It's moving so fast. It's very difficult to predict that. So I wanted to get some more data. So I actually threw this back out to everyone on Twitter. And there were some very interesting responses. So to answer this question, how is Python going to change over the next 5 to 10 years? What's going to happen to the Python language? I'm going to go over these responses that I got here and discuss them. And I think then we're going to get a very broad picture of what the community thinks is going to happen to Python over the next 5 to 10 years. So let's jump right in. All right, first reply here, Python will grow into a lizard. That's fairly likely. I'm not sure if this is going to be a good thing or a bad thing for us. We're going to have to rename all of our projects. But it'd be cool if Python grew some legs. All right, so Goran says that Python is going to be a leading programming language for IoT. And I believe that stands for the Internet of Things. So the idea that, well, basically you have a ton of devices that are all connected to the internet, and basically every little thing will be connected to the internet in the future, which is something that many people are predicting just as a way for tech to move in general. And so Goran thinks that Python will be a leading programming language in this space. Now, this is very interesting. This is not something that I've heard before. I think with the attention and the traction that Python is seeing at the moment, where a lot of new programmers are learning Python, it might be likely that Python is going to play a big role in this. And to be honest, it's not something that I've considered, but I think this is an interesting thought here. So Daniel says that Python will be 100% functional programming. No more for loops and nested for loops. So this is interesting too. So I guess Daniel is saying that Python might in the future actually change the recommended programming paradigm, or the Python language is going to change in the future to change the programming paradigm that it's used for primarily. And that's a pretty far out idea, I think. Personally, I don't think this will happen, because it's very, like, when I look at the past, like how languages changed in the past, it's kind of hard for languages to completely change the initial paradigm they started out with. Like if you look at Java, like it was meant to be the object-oriented programming language, the OOP language, and did it ever really move away from that? Not really. Same with C#, I think. And some other languages that have been around for a long time. And with Python, it's also been not like that. Like it's more, I guess like Python is more a multi-paradigm language. And I'd be surprised to see if it moved 100% into a more functional programming paradigm language. But nevertheless, it's a cool idea. It's interesting to see what's coming up here. All right, someone else, Alexander here, agrees with Daniel and says that he believes also Python will be 100% functional programming. Very interesting. I did not really expect that, or it wouldn't have been my first idea here, but very interesting nevertheless. Okay, so John says Python's going to change into something that's not backwards compatible, no doubt. That's interesting. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen over the next 5 to 10 years with Python. It's a pretty long time. If we're talking about a decade here, there's definitely languages where backwards incompatible changes have been made, and you could argue that, to some degree Python 3 is not fully backwards compatible with Python 2 due to some of the Unicode changes there. So it's interesting too. I mean, it's fairly likely that when you compare Python today with what it's going to be like in 10 years, that there's going to be some changes that are not going to be 100% backward compatible. I would think that's probably true. All right, so Alessandro says that we will have a multi-purpose unstoppable Anaconda. All right, so first I thought this was about the Anaconda package manager, but this is, now that I read it again, like this response is more about, Python reaching into all kinds of other places that it's maybe not being used at the moment. At least that's how I interpret Alessandro's suggestion here. And that's interesting. He posts this graph here, Python compared to smaller growing technologies. So he's comparing this to, or in this graph, they're comparing, I guess, so this might be from the Stack Overflow survey, where they're comparing the number of overall question views per month between some languages, for example, R, Swift, TypeScript, Scala, Go, and Rust, and in Python by comparison. Now, it would be interesting to actually see also where, the other established languages like Java, C#, are showing up in this graph. And now that's very interesting when you compare the Python graph with the Swift graph, for example. I always thought Swift was huge because it is the now recommended language for the iOS and macOS ecosystem, basically all of the Apple stuff. And it's kind of interesting to see just in terms of the engagement that these languages get from the community, that Python is so far ahead by comparison. So I think this is an interesting thought from Alessandro here, and I would agree that Python is probably going to expand into other industries and other places where maybe right now it is not as popular. So maybe we're going to have a really great mobile development solution, or maybe a really great VR software development solution for Python in the future. Very interesting thought. All right, Murat here says that he thinks that new languages will evolve from Python, and that this is bound to be. I totally agree. I mean, Python is already inspiring new languages that are sprouting up, that are inspired by how the Python programming language works and how the syntax looks. For example, there is I believe it's called Coconut, which is a functional language, a 100% purely functional language that's based on the Python syntax. I'm not sure if it actually also runs on the Python interpreter or Python VM, but it's definitely inspired by it. And yeah, I totally agree. We're going to see a bunch of languages that are going to be feeding off the popularity of Python in the years to come. I think that is probably going to happen. All right, Python 4.0 for the win in static typing. So this is interesting too. I mean, we're probably going to see a big jump in version numbers for sure. It's going to be interesting if we're going to see a big change in the backwards compatible as we go from Python 3 to 4. I think there was I remember like reading some interview with Guido van Rossum, that in the future they wanted to avoid having big backwards compatibility breaking changes in the future, and that was one of the challenges with going from Python 2 to 3. So yeah, we're probably going to see Python 4.0 or Python 4 over the next 5 to 10 years for sure. Static typing, yes, absolutely. I think, so this is my main gut feeling, that this will play a big role in the language in the future. I mean, already you can see that with static type checkers like MyPy getting more and more traction in the language, moving into a direction where it makes it so much easier to support these external static type checking tools. I think they're going to play a bigger and bigger role in the future. And yeah, it's a good question whether or not this will at one point be integrated into the language, or if it's going to stay an external tool. I can see benefits to both sides, but I'm curious to see how this will play out. And I think if we get more static typing features, that's also going to open the door to maybe like compiling Python to machine language directly, so it can run faster. And in some cases where that where the performance impact of that is really relevant, so this could be an interesting change for the language in the future. All right, so Ben says that number one, he thinks we will see improved performance, deployments will be easier, and we will get rid of the GIL, the global interpreter lock. So yeah, improved performance. I think there's lots of opportunity in Python for improving the performance of the interpreter and the virtual machine. So I'm sure we're going to see some changes there, even with projects like PyPy gaining traction. I could totally see that become a viable option, or some alternative virtual machine actually getting more popular than CPython in the future. Could totally happen. Deployments will be easier. That is interesting. Interesting suggestion there. My gut feeling is that, well, as more and more people use Python, for sure there will be more and more support to make it easier to deploy our projects in whatever means, whether that's shipping an app to a customer's computer, or if it's about running an application in the cloud somewhere, like a web application, hosting it somewhere, or maybe even shipping it to someone's mobile phone and running it there. So the Galectomy is interesting too. So this is a big project that people are working on for CPython right now. So the GIL is the global interpreter lock, and it basically means that when you have multiple threads executing at the same time, really only one of them can execute code, can perform actual computations within a single interpreter process. So this has some impact on performance. So some types of multiprocessing in Python, or parallel programming in Python, they're a little bit harder to do if you're CPU bound. If you're IO bound, it doesn't really matter. But if you're CPU bound, then it can be hard to do that within a single Python process. And the idea then, or to work around this, what people do a lot of times these days, is they just fan out and run multiple Python interpreters at the same time, and then you can get around that restriction. But it's kind of a wart in the interpreter and in the language that is there for historical reasons, and people are working on getting rid of this so that we can actually have multi-threading capabilities that are comparable to other languages like Java, for example. And I'm pretty sure there will be tons of progress on this Galectomy and this issue soon. So really looking forward to see some of the results of that. Victor says we're going to have a PyBorg. Yeah, I guess we're all going to be assimilated into the Python ecosystem. Looking forward to that. Python in the web browser with WebAssembly. So this is interesting too. WebAssembly is technology that basically standardizes a virtual machine that is very close to the metal, to the real kind of instructions that your CPU would run. And it's about adding that virtual machine to the browser. And right now, the only way to run code in a browser is through JavaScript, which means that, well, pretty much everything has to be programmed in JavaScript if you want to run code in the browser. Now, there are tools where you can take other programming languages and compile them to JavaScript. There's also tools that do that for Python, compilers that do that for Python. But the problem has always been that this is often not very performant. So the idea with WebAssembly is that you pretty much have a way to just compile some binary that you can run on any web browser on a standardized virtual machine, and it would be a lot faster than going through running JavaScript. And if that project is successful, then that would mean we could see a lot more languages as viable options for doing web programming. And this can only be a good thing for a language like Python and many other languages. So this is a very, very interesting thought. I'm sure we're going to see some interesting projects happen based on that. I'm pretty confident that WebAssembly will gain more and more traction in the future. And this is potentially a great opportunity for Python. All right, so Matt here says that he would personally love to see optional runtime type checking built into CPython when annotations exist and MyPy static checking is built or built in. Well, I guess the spirit of this reply is that we're going to potentially see optional runtime type checking in the standard Python interpreter, and we don't have to run it through MyPy or an external type checker to get type checking. I think this could happen. It kind of relates to what I talked about earlier. I think type checking is a big deal, and moving forward, it's going to get more and more important. So it'll be interesting to see what's going to happen here. So Julio here says that we will program in a derivative of Python. I'm not sure what IA is. That's AI or some other acronym that I don't know. Okay, we're going to program in a derivative of Python. Fairly likely. I mean, the Python we have today, it's likely gonna evolve and change. So Juan here says that Python will be a mainstay in some sectors of the industry and academia. However, its popularity will fade with the next paradigm shift in programming languages. Now, that's interesting too. So, as you've probably heard, there's a lot of traction with Python right now. It is growing like crazy. There's many more developers, many new developers that are being taught Python and are learning Python. And it's just a very popular language, and it has been growing in popularity over the last couple of years. So, of course, this popularity is not going to last forever, right? If you look at any other programming language, there's always kind of a peak in the adoption and the popularity, and then it always slowly fades out. And the same thing is going to happen with Python for sure. And I guess the question is like how long, like when is it going to start to fade out? Like, are we still in the growing phase? Are we stagnating, or are we sort of fading out? I think right now we're definitely in the growing phase. Nobody knows how long this will continue. And then we're going to be, peaking, sitting there for a while, and then slowly fade out as people go to other languages. This has happened in the past. It's probably going to happen to Python at some point. Is it going to happen over the next 5 years, over the next 10 years? After that, nobody knows. And if it's going to happen for good reason, right? Because other languages are going to have bigger benefits, and they're going to make programming faster, cheaper, more enjoyable, whatever, some tangible benefit. And if that happens, then Python is eventually going to decline, just like any other language. So I think this is an interesting prediction. I certainly, don't hope or foresee that this will happen over the next 5 years, but nobody really knows. Okay, gradual typing will become mainstream. Okay, another typing suggestion here by Ivan. Totally agree. I think this will really play a bigger role in Python. All right, so Hassan here says that the semicolon will die. Secondly, the braces will be killed off. And thirdly, I'm scared for job security. Okay, so a couple of things to touch on there. I guess if the semicolon dies and we kill off all the braces, that means Python is going to have a huge success, I guess, right? Because if all the other languages that use semicolons and braces are going away, then Python is just going to totally take over. I'm not sure. Okay, so if I think about this as sort of saying Python is going to take over the world, the programming world, and it will destroy all other programming languages, then I don't think that's very likely going to happen, right? There's a reason we have this universe, this multitude or ecosystem with many programming languages that have strength and weaknesses, right? And I think there will always be an opportunity for other languages to coexist with Python, just like Python is coexisting with all these other languages at the moment, right? Like if you look at systems programming, nobody is going to write an operating system in Python. I mean, maybe they will in 10 years, right? So we'll have to see. But likewise, few people are ever going to write a 3D rendering engine in Python, right? Just because of the performance isn't there where you want to be very close to the bare metal. And so I think Python's probably not going to replace all the other languages that are out there at the moment, but it's an interesting thought. And thirdly, Hassan says he's scared for job security. So I'm not sure what he means by that exactly. I'm sort of taking it as, well, what's going to happen to the Python job situation? Are there going to be more or less Python jobs in 5 to 10 years? My personal take on this is that there will likely be many more jobs, just because right now the language is booming and companies are making big investments in Python, in adopting Python, and in training people to learn Python. And if you have people who are really skilled in a language, I think we're going to see more job opportunities as well, right? Because if I can hire someone who knows how to write Python and I can put them on a Python project, that's going to be way cheaper for me as an employer, as a company, as a consultancy, whatever, compared with hiring a Python developer and then training them how to write JavaScript or training them how to write C# or whatever other programming language you could think about here. So I think this kind of explosion in popularity will be a good thing for Python for a long time to come. We're going to be able to ride out that wave for a long time. But of course, you got to be realistic. Nobody knows what's going to happen over the next 10 years. Maybe there will be an AI revolution or a fantastically popular programming language that will just blow everything else out of the water. And then we're going to have to adapt. Now, personally, I think Python is a language that sets you on the right path. If you're starting out learning how to program today, I think Python, it kind of guides you in the right direction, and it teaches you many of the best practices and skills that are going to be valuable in any programming language to work in. So, I don't want to sugarcoat it and say Python is going to be around forever. Really, if you're a programmer, you're going to have to adapt over the course of your career. If you take on a new job, you're going to likely have to learn a new language in many cases, or just be fluid and be up to date and keep in touch with what's happening in the space, right? It's not, if you're a programmer, it's not a career where you get trained once for a year or two and then you can just, coast on these skills. It doesn't work like that. The field is moving so fast, you got to stay up to date and you got to learn new stuff almost every single day. That's just a reality of it. And the good news is that you're getting paid a ton of money to do that as well. And it's a lot of fun. So that's kind of my perspective on Python job security. Again, really, really appreciate all of these replies. This was really, really interesting. We touched on so many things here that I would have never thought about if I had just sat down and answered that question all in my head here. So yeah, this was great. Thanks everyone who replied back to this tweet. If you have a question that you'd like me to cover in some of my future videos, then just leave a comment below and let me know. All right, happy Pythoning and have a great day.